My name is Lieutenant Aldo Rain, and I'm putting together a special team, and I need me 8 soldiers. 8 Jewish American soldiers. Now, y'all might have heard rumors about the Armada happening soon. Well, we'll be leaving a little earlier. We're gonna be dropped into France, dressed as civilians. And once we're in enemy territory, as a bushwhacking guerrilla army, we're gonna be doing one thing, and one thing only. Killing Nazis.
Yes! Where do I sign up? Let's do it! Everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Psych podcast, the podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, as always, Dr. Alex Swan, and today we have a bit of a fun one. A little loose on the psych concepts that we sort of name in the show, but honestly, this one feels so right as far as just talking about the portrayal of psychology that gets all up in your head, thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? How are we going to do this? This is both a crazy movie, but also a movie that makes you think. At least I think so. There's a lot of fun film studies going on in this one. The film that we are talking about is Quentin Tarantino's 2009 film Inglorious Basterds. It's kind of like a Western during World War II. He likes his spaghetti westerns, or his spaghetti western type movies, doesn't he? He also has a lot of other things he does throughout his films. You see Diane Kruger's foot. Yeah, I thought I'd get that right out in front here. Quentin Tarantino, when he writes and directs his movies, make sure to get women's feet in there. And it's always women's feet. It's nobody else's feet. It's women's feet. Okay. So yeah, getting right out there. He's and not kink shaming or anything like that. I just, get that right out there. You're going to see one. That's it. That's all I mean. A lot of great characters in this movie played by wonderful people. I mean, the list goes on and on. So Brad Pitt is the lead in the movie. He plays Lieutenant Aldo Rain. I believe he is from Tennessee. And one of the great accents that he's ever put on for a role, in my opinion, of course. Next, we have Diane Kruger. She is of German descent and plays a famous German movie star. I don't know if it was too hard for her to do at this point. I thought that pretty on the nose. Bridget von Hammersmark. Such a name, though. I don't think that's a real German last name, but I guess it could be. Eli Roth, before he started fiddling around with his own crazy movies, plays Sergeant Donnie Donowitz, the Bear Jew, as he is named by really scared German soldiers. Christoph Waltz. Oh, I gotta tell you, Christoph Waltz, just my favorite character of his in anything that he's done, but also just my favorite character in this movie. He is phenomenal, isn't he? I don't know anyone who looks at that performance and goes, nah, it's middling, derivative. Oh, no, I don't agree with you if that's the case. Melanie Laurent is also in the movie. She plays a lovely character named Shoshana, but also she sort of has two names. But Mimiu is the fake last name that she assumes when she gets into Paris. Michael Fassbender, also in the movie, has a great dual nationality role for himself because he is both British and German. And so he played those two roles wonderfully. Daniel Bruhl, BJ Novak, Till Schweiger, a very big German movie star, very big German movie star. I think perhaps my favorite of like the weird random roles that you see throughout this movie is Mike Myers as a general with hanging out with Winston Churchill, like just randomly playing a British guy just because he played a British guy in Austin Powers. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason why he's doing this role. So good, so good. Anyways, just a brief plot of this, and then we'll jump into our segment with the guest host. So there is a group of American soldiers under Lieutenant Aldo Raine who are called the Bastards, who are airdropped into enemy France, German-occupied France, just outside of Paris, and their job is to kill Nazis. As Aldo Raine says, Nazis. Okay? So what's special about this group? Well, it's a group of American soldiers who have one thing in common. They're all Jewish. So this is a Jewish group, and they get Till Schweiger to join them, a German defector. Bridget von Hammersmark, played by Diane Kruger, is also a defector, enemy spy, trying to get in close with Goebbels, the propaganda minister at the time. So their job is to kill as many Nazis as possible. Well, they get word of this showing at a Paris movie theater, and they're going to see if they could go blow up some Joseph Goebbels. Oh. They get an added benefit of a late edition Hitler will be there. This theater is run by, in secret, Shoshana Dreyfus, whom Christoph Waltz's character has been long searching for ever since a few years prior in the war. He murdered her family, but she got away. I hope that makes sense. These are a bunch of intertwining stories that all come together at the end, much like most of Quentin Tarantino's movies, sort of this split ends of a rope coming entwined at the very top. Or if you want to think about it, untwined at the top and taut at the bottom. This is kind of his storytelling trope. He's not the only one who tells stories like this, interweaving stories that all meet at the end, but he is pretty famous for it because most of his movies follow this. Not all of them. Some of the older movies don't really do that. They have a lot of flashback stuff going on, like Reservoir Dogs has flashbacks. But Pulp Fiction is a bunch of interweaving stories. This is Hateful Eight is a bunch of interweaving stories. So you can kind of tell that this is going to follow that. Still great, though. Still really great. All right, let's get into this awesome movie. Yep, it is perhaps in my top 20. Awesome movie. Let's jump into it with our guest. My guest host today is a friend of the show, Jason Spiegelman. Jason, how are things? And what are you looking forward to in the coming school semester?
Hi, Alex. It's nice to be back with you. Things are good. Our college here in Baltimore, where I teach, the Community College of Baltimore County, like a lot of schools, our enrollment is starting to pick up, and
Yes.
We're looking forward to a nice fall semester. And I have no complaints. I'm looking forward to being back in the classroom. I love my summers off, but I'm ready to get back to teaching.
Excellent. Anything else going on?
Not a whole lot. No.
No? No?
Just working on my writing projects and preparing my syllabi, and that's about it.
Okay, I'll be the one to say it then. So, also, you were recently awarded the Wayne Whiten Teaching Excellent Award, and of course I have to say it because I am your friend, and I live to embarrass you. Live and love to embarrass you, but this award was awarded by our friends at the Society for the Teaching of Psychology, an organization we talk a lot about on this show, STP. It's awarded to the best of that year, faculty member from a 2-year or community college for all the things they do for students, hard work and demonstrable teaching prowess. Yeah, that's right. Prowess. Live with that word. Prowess. You are going to receive this award at ACT, the annual conference on teaching that's put on by STP this October. And, you already know this, but listener, I'm going to be there to tearfully witness his receipt of this award. Congratulations, Jason.
I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you. It is quite an honor, and it's funny because when you find out about something like this, the first thing you think to yourself is they made some kind of mistake. But
they surely did.
They surely did. But it's nothing like this is ever won without an awful lot of people standing behind you and lifting you up on their shoulders, and you are one of them. And I appreciate you and all the people who have helped me get to this auspicious occasion. I'm very excited to get the award in Pittsburgh, the city of my birth, so I'll get to go back and see family and friends there as well. So I look forward to seeing you and so many others in October.
Yeah, that's awesome that you get this award in your hometown. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
Looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. Thank you for mentioning it. I'm very humbled and honored by it.
You bet, man. All right. Well, welcome back to the show. You know how this goes. If, dear listener, you are not familiar with Jason, as he said, he teaches at the Community College of Baltimore County, out there in Baltimore, Maryland, and he is the Psych 101 fiend. That's right, fiend. So today, we, as I mentioned in the intro, we are talking about Inglorious Basterds, a film, Jason, you felt very strongly about when we were talking about which movie to discuss in our reuniting. Tell us a little bit about why you felt so strongly.
Well, when we were having our conversation, we actually kicked around a few different Tarantino movies.
Sure.
And the next time you ask me, it's probably going to be Pulp Fiction or Kill Bill or if I can bear it, Django Unchained. He's just such a genius.
Tarantino. You think Tarantino's a genius?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Django also.
Okay, fair enough.
The cinematic techniques that he uses are well beyond my comprehension, but just glorious. And there was so much in this film that really struck me that when I saw it back when it was in the theaters, a good dozen years ago, some of my reactions to the scenes the first time I saw it have really stuck with me over the years. And as I have assigned it to students, I've had them report on exactly those same moments and the same kinds of feelings. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that pulls us as human beings, as psychological creatures in different directions when you watch this movie. And I think that's some of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I think what might be a thing to bear repeating, as I said in the intro, we're probably going to discuss this movie from just a broad psychological perspective, as opposed to some of the other episodes on that have appeared on the show and will appear on the show, where we specifically chunk out the vocabulary and psychological concepts you would find in a classroom. I think this movie is better served by just talking about the psychology of the filmmaking process. I like throwing these in here. So when you said Inglorious Basterds, I first had a thought of, okay, what are the psych concepts, without having watched it in a while. I've probably seen it a handful of times, or at least the majority of it a handful of times. I don't know if I've always watched it through. But I was thinking, what are the Psych concepts in this? Watched it again. I'm like, well, I'm not going to really try to say, oh, that's this bias or that's that concept like we do on some episodes. I thought this one might be best served by just talking about moments and the psychology of those moments. And since you regard Tarantino so highly, Jason, I think as a burgeoning film student myself, reading textbooks on film studies and filmmaking recently, I like adding little flares of this to the show. And so we'll probably spend a little bit more time doing that in this episode. Just because there's no like, hey, this is confirmation bias. Let's talk about confirmation bias. More like, why do people have the reactions that they have for this movie? How did Tarantino achieve some of his artistic goals? That kind of thing. And so to that end, Jason, I think what we can do is take the movie chronologically. So start to end and talk about important things that occur along the way. How does that sound to you?
Well, we'll do our best. I think we're probably going to bounce back and forth a little bit, but generally starting at the start and working our way toward the end is the right approach.
Yeah, to follow the plot a little bit.
And what's interesting is this is one of the Tarantino movies where he doesn't do that sort of temporal bouncing like he does in Pulp Fiction, where all of the tentacles of the movie sort of collapse together at the very end. This one is very chronological, and so it makes sense to go through it in that direction.
I disagree with your characterization on that. I think this is a frayed rope with a knot at the end, because it's different storylines all converging at one time. The other storylines don't know that they're occurring. The only jump in linear time is just because we need to follow the progression of the war. But I think these are the same sort of tentacle, as you say, setup to all converge at the very, very end, right? The final act is when they all come together.
Well, I don't know.
Hateful Eight, Pulp Fiction.
I take your point at the different storylines converging, but when you talk about sort of the temporal sequencing, I think back again to one of my absolute favorite movies, Pulp Fiction, which starts at the end in the diner scene and then ends at the end in the diner scene. So we have sort of the shifting around there. But okay, we can agree to disagree.
Yeah, I think so, because I think that's a bit of a stretch as far as temporality goes. A lot of filmmakers like to start at the end and then go like, how did we get here?
Gotcha.
So let's start at the beginning. So my favorite character in this whole movie is Christoph Waltz, and as Hans Landa, Colonel Hans Landa of the Schutzstaffel, right? The SS. Terrifying, yet a smaller man. He's not a typical German as described by Hitler of the Aryan race, right? He's a very small person and yet terrifying, but disarming. And so in this first scene, we get all of that all rolled into one, where he follows up on a search for Jews, having recently been handed the Jew hunter moniker by the local French. And he's researching a dairy farm, being very terrifying with a glass of milk. I've never felt so terrified with milk in a scene before.
Monsieur L'Appétit, are you aware of the nickname the people of France have given me?
I have no interest in such things.
But you're aware of what they call me.
I'm aware.
What are you aware of?
They call you the Jew hunter?
Precisely. I understand your trepidation in repeating it. Heydrich apparently hates the moniker the good people of Prague have bestowed on him. Actually, why he would hate the name the Hangman's baffling to me. It would appear he's done everything in his power to earn it. I, on the other hand, love my unofficial title, precisely because I've earned it. The feature that makes me such an effective hunter of the Jews is, as opposed to most German soldiers, I can think like a Jew, where they can only think like a German. More precisely, a German soldier. Now, if one were to determine what attribute the German people share with a beast, it would be the cunning and the predatory instinct of a hawk. But if one were to determine what attributes the Jews share with the beast, it would be that of the rat. The Führer and Goebbels' propaganda have said pretty much the same thing, but where our conclusions differ is I don't consider the comparison an insult. Consider for a moment the world a rat lives in. It's a hostile world, indeed. If a rat were to scamper through your front door right now, would you greet it with hostility?
I suppose I would.
Has a rat ever done anything to you to create this animosity you feel toward him?
Rats spread disease. They bite people.
Rats were the cause of the bubonic plague, but that's some time ago. I propose to you any disease a rat could spread, a squirrel could equally carry. Would you agree?
Why?
Yet I assume you don't share the same animosity with squirrels that you do with rats, do you?
No.
Yet they're both rodents, are they not? And except for the tail, they even rather look alike, don't they?
It's an interesting thought, Herr Colonel.
However interesting as the thought may be, it makes not one bit of difference to how you feel. If a rat were to walk in here right now as I'm talking, would you greet it with a source of your delicious milk?
Probably not.
I didn't think so. You don't like them. You don't really know why you don't like them. All you know is you find them repulsive. Consequently, a German soldier conducts a search of a house suspected of hiding Jews. Where does the hawk look? He looks in the barn, he looks in the attic, he looks in a cellar, he looks everywhere he would hide. But there's so many places it would never occur to a hawk to hide. However, the reason the Führers brought me off my Alps in Austria and placed me in French cow country today is because it does occur to me. Because I'm aware what tremendous feats human beings are capable of once they abandon dignity.
And he's interrogating this farmer who has 3 daughters and looking for a family of Jews named the Dreyfuses.
The Dreyfuses.
Exactly. So, Jason, I want to get your thoughts first. What struck you about this scene?
What is, there's so much, of course. There's the shifting of the language when he knows that the Dreyfuses, who are under the floorboards, do not speak English, and we'll get to that. There is the clear reference to the fact that from the first 60 seconds, when we see Monsieur Lapadite outside and he sees Landa and his men driving up, he already knows what's happening. There is no question. And the rest of the scene up until the moment where the Jew hunter reveals his agenda is nothing more than what's the right word? It's mockery. It's popcorn until we get to it's the appetizer, right?
Yeah.
What strikes me about the scene, of course, is also the end. The absence of closure. We see Shoshana Dreyfus running away, and Landa goes, "Au revoir, Shoshana," right?
Yeah, he says it in such a sing-songy way, too.
Right. He's mocking her as he's looking at her through the sight of the gun, but he doesn't shoot. We don't know what happens to Lepadit and his daughters. No. And that is a very Tarantine-esque kind of approach to leave the scene unfinished and let us wonder. And if you, I haven't seen any interviews with Tarantino about this scene in particular. I'm sure they exist. And if you ask him, did the Le Padits survive? I sort of suspect he wouldn't answer the question.
No, I don't think he would either. And I think it's safe to assume that his orders were very clear. Obviously, find the Dreyfuses and end them. But also, do not give favor to anyone harboring them, right?
Right.
I think that was pretty clear during the war.
Yes, but then during his interrogation, he says, if you make my job easy, right? If you tell me what I need to know and don't make me work harder, your reward will be that we will never disturb you again. And
I think
question
he was just blowing smoke.
Well, I do too, but again, Tarantino lets us wonder.
Right.
He's not going to tell us what happened.
Right. And so what I pulled from this is the language thing, as you mentioned. When I first saw this scene back in 2009, I was like, they must be switching to English for the audience. Because it's the first scene of the movie, and you're like, as if Tarantino's going to make us read subtitles the entire time. Of course he is.
Which, as it turns out, he did.
Yeah, of course he does. I mean, that's not only true to what's going on in the world at the time, as if they're speaking English normally, randomly in German-occupied France. Like, no, they're not. So I was like, oh, okay, so they're gonna like do this in movie switcherino, and they're just gonna be like, let's talk in English. But of course, it was just a ruse because he took a guess. I imagine he took a guess that the rural families in France probably only knew French. And maybe a little German, but maybe not even that. And so he took a guess that La Petite knew English well enough to have a conversation that would not be interpreted by the Dreyfuses hiding under the floorboard. But I counter, how do you not get the English out of that? There's so many French loan words. How do you not get that something is going to happen? I don't know. I was like, yeah, this makes sense, but also doesn't make sense. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting how you said sort of the movie-esque, we're just suddenly going to switch to English. It reminds me of every sort of Soviet Tom Clancy spy thriller out there. They always start, nu po-ruski, right? And eventually they switch to Russian-affected English for us so that we don't have to read the whole movie.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that the vast majority of this movie was in German and in French. And so we did have to read the majority of the movie. And if you don't speak any of those two languages, then it becomes even more of a challenge.
It's honestly great, though, because I'm learning German. I'm doing it slowly, and I'm doing it on my time, but I'm learning German. And so it was fun to revisit a movie that I knew was that had a lot of German and pretty decent subtitles. I remember that the subtitles were sort of stylized in many ways, especially the deliberate subtitles, so they're part of the movie. And so that was great. That was fun. And then, like, just because Tarantino likes to write sharp dialogue, it was easy to follow people speaking in German and like sort of connect it to the subtitles, because of how sharp and short they all spoke. Like it's a sentence, period. Another sentence, period. Another person speaks, sentence, period. Another person speaks, period. It was so easy to follow, and it was so fun to be able to do that. I wasn't much as fan as French parts, but
And then, of course, the best part of all of this is that Christoph Waltz speaks fluently in German, French, Italian, and English.
Yes.
So, perfect.
Yeah, so he does that role, and then the guy who plays La Petite, being a French actor who also speaks English, really great. Michael Fassbender speaks fluent German because he is of both German and English background, so it was like funny. Tarantino cast this movie really well because he found people that sort of fit the written word that he had created. Maybe he was writing for specific people, I don't know, but like he found people that just work so well.
I did a little reading, as I'm sure anybody would go to IMDb, and Michael Fassbender, is that how you pronounce his name?
Fassbender.
What? He had to actually work with a German vocal coach to learn how to be somebody who spoke English. As somebody who learned to speak German as if he was an English-speaking person trying to pretend to be German and get rid of a German accent.
Yeah.
Because his native German accent was too authentic. I thought that's classic. That would be like, me growing up in Pittsburgh trying to learn how to speak with a Louisiana accent, but sound like I was coming from Chicago trying to pretend to be in the Bayou. I mean, wow, right?
It was amazing, right? Like
Very
so
cool
well
stuff.
done. So well done. And of course, Diane Kruger, a German actress in her own right, doesn't have that strong of a German accent in her other work when she plays somebody with a German background, but an American. So most notably, I think, would be her National Treasure character. You can hear some of the accent in there, but she's done so well in getting an American accent to come out of the thick German, and then she has to put it back on to speak English in this movie. It's great.
And then the, forgive the French, the pièce de résistance is when Major Hellstrom turns around and he uses the incorrect accent that does not apply well to a particular region of German to identify Hickox as not who he says he is in the bar scene that we'll get to later.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff when it comes to the linguistic manipulations. Speaking of bringing it back to the idea of closure, right, where we don't know if the Le Padites survive, and I would argue that they probably do not. Something that I do think is interesting in another interview that I saw with Tarantino, he leaves us with a little bit of non-closure, an absence of closure, just in the title of the movie. The Inglorious Basterds, spelled Basterds, as opposed to the correct spelling of the word.
I have a headcanon for that.
You have
I have a headcanon for that.
I don't know what a headcanon is.
This is my own canon. You need to go read up what headcanon means. No, this is my own canon reason for Bastards. I don't think Aldo Rain knows how to spell bastards.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
That makes perfect sense. He's not he's bright in his own way, but certainly not book smart. And when Tarantino was asked about this, he looked at the interview right in the face and said, "I'm not going to tell you, and I will never tell anyone why it is misspelled. Your hypothesis is as good as any."
That's why it's called a headcanon.
There you go. I wondered if it was just because he wanted to distinguish it from the 1978 version of the film, which did spell it correctly.
That could be.
I don't love that hypothesis, but I think yours makes an awful lot of sense, since Aldo Rain is responsible for putting together the Bastards.
And so maybe he just wanted to put in some emphasis on turds.
I'll let you have that one.
I mean, then you would say, well, why didn't he spell it Turds? And to that, dear listener, I don't have an answer for you. I just think he just can't spell. And so the way he pronounces words is funny because he's from Tennessee. And so he just probably thinks that's how you spell bastards. I don't know. Now, Quentin Tarantino saying that to an interviewer is pretty annoying, but because he is a very annoying human being. But I get it. I get it. I don't like it, and so I'll believe my headcanon until somebody says I shouldn't.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so let's bring it back to Hans Landa. Okay. So-called the Jew Hunter doesn't really like the name, but he knows that he earns it, right? He knows that he has earned it. And so he's kind of a creepy dude. And we were debating a little bit before. I don't want to get too much into it, but we were debating, Jason and I, about Landa's true intentions in the movie. And one of those true intentions, in my view, after the events of letting Shoshana escape, is he wants to defect, and everything that he does in the second and third acts of the movie all work toward defecting. He sees the writing on the wall in 1944, and that's why he does the things that he does. But that doesn't make him any less sociopathic, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
So it's an interesting character in terms of if we were going to look through a lens of sort of psychopathology. Is he sociopathic? Is he, afflicted with antisocial personality disorder? It would seem to be a slam dunk, right? He's without empathy. Right. Yeah. He is a cold-blooded killer. If he doesn't pull the trigger, he orders the trigger pulled. He is extremely charming in a way that just lets him climb right up the ranks of the inner circle of the Third Reich. And yet he talks about the fact that he doesn't have anything particularly hateful in him against Jews other than doesn't like them, but doesn't hate them, sees them as rats. But he says, you feel a certain way about a rat and you don't know why you feel that way. He doesn't pull the trigger on this little girl running across the field. And yet at the end, he would seem to be the hero, at least on some level. He is going to single-handedly end the war by allowing Hitler to get blown away. Was this him all along? Who is this man? I don't know.
He is an enigma. Like I said, my favorite character in this movie because he gets under your skin. And one of the filmmaking techniques that he uses to add to that anxiety in a scene with Hans Landa and Shoshana as Mademoiselle Mimieux, when she assumes an identity and has a cinema in Paris, there's this great scene or the great filmmaking technique that Quentin Tarantino uses where he keeps the focus on Shoshana and they're speaking German, and we don't know whether or not Shoshana understands German. We know she speaks French, but we don't know if she understands German. There's no indication in any of her interactions with Germans in the movie that she understands German beyond a few words here and there.
Except when she's up on her ladder outside of her cinema and Major Hellstrom gets out of the car and he orders her in German to get her ass down off of the ladder, and she drops her rag and immediately comes down the ladder. So there is a little bit of evidence there.
I don't know if that necessarily reflects whether she knows German, but that she knows some words that get her ass out the way or to someplace.
Who knows?
As sort of like a cattle dog to a herd, right?
Right.
So the camera stays tight on her as she gets more and more agitated, not knowing or potentially listening to what they're saying, but not really knowing that she can escape or not escape, or if she's going to get found out, if they know who she is. And we are just sucked in to that situation with her. And it's phenomenal.
There's a beautiful moment in that scene. It's about a 5-second pause when Landa says, "There was something else I wanted to ask you," and he stares at her and his face changes to the scary sort of ghoulish glare of his, and we're waiting for him to say, "Aren't you the girl I didn't kill?" And he says, "Oh, never mind, must not have been important." Beautiful, beautiful filmmaking.
He knew it, obviously. We both know that. He knew 100% that was Shoshana Dreyfus. You don't agree with me, Jason?
You and I had a conversation about this, and you convinced me of it, that this was all his ruse for the defection.
Yep. Everything he does. Because he's okay with the new location for the movie. Goebbels' new war propaganda
Epic.
film, epic, with Zoller Friedrich Zoller as his new German superstar, who is going to change the face of the Third Reich, give it some youthful energy. And he was like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And, you know, he knows it. Hans Landa knows it, and I will go to the grave. That is a hill that I will see from a distance and go, "That's a hill."
Well, you know, I was convinced of what you are arguing. The one thing that you and I were not able to really resolve was the plot hole. And the plot hole is, if don't roll your eyes at me, the plot hole is, if in fact he knows who she is, and if in fact these are all his ministrations to have, you know, the top figures of the Third Reich taken down, why did he strangle with his bare hands Frau von Hammerschmack when he found out that in fact she might be on his side trying to topple the whole thing? Why would he strangle her? And you and I didn't come to sort of terms on this.
Appearances.
It can't be appearances, because he left her dead in the office and nobody knew that she was dead in there. How can this be appearances?
Oh, they had to know. When the three bastards were ready to go, when the three bastards were, you know, gonna go find their seats and whatnot. "Oh, Frau von Hammerschmack, can you come to my office, please?" Like, they knew.
0023, 0024.
These guys were so bad. They were hilarious, though.
Margheriti. Trying to say his name in Italian. No, listen, I buy your argument that that he knew who she was and that this was his ministrations. I don't buy your argument that we just don't have a raging plot hole and why would he kill von Hammerschmack, but we can move past it.
Yeah, I'm friends, come to my aid here. Convince Jason even further. Please. You even call him cold, calculating, sociopathic. I mean, that's what a sociopath would do.
A sociopath is also interested in their own agendas. A sociopath does whatever they need to do to get theirs.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, what he needs to do is allow the bastards to detonate the bomb.
So you're Aldo the Apache.
So you're the Jew hunter.
I'm a detective. A damn good detective. Finding people is my specialty, so naturally I worked for the Nazis finding people, and yes, some of them were Jews, but Jew hunter? Just a name that stuck.
Well, you do have to admit, it is catchy.
Do you control the nicknames your enemies bestow on you? Aldo the Apache and the Little Man?
What do you mean, the little man?
German's nickname for you.
The German's nickname for me is the little man?
And as if to make my point, I'm a little surprised how tall you were in real life. I mean, you're a little fellow, but not circus midget little as your reputation would suggest.
Where's my man? Where's Bridget von Hammerschmack?
Well, let's just say she got what she deserved. And when you purchase friends like Bridget von Hammerschmack, you get what you pay for. Now, as far as your paisanos, Sergeant Donowitz and Private Omar...
How you know their names?
Lieutenant Aldo.
If you don't think I wouldn't interrogate every single one of your swastika-marked survivors... We simply aren't operating on the level of mutual respect, I assume.
No, I guess not.
Well, back to the whereabouts of your two Italian saboteurs. As of this moment, both Omar and Donowitz should be sitting in the very seats we left them in. 0023 and 0024, if my memory serves. Explosives still around their ankle, still ready to explode, and your mission, some would call it terrorist plot, as of this moment, is still a go.
That's a pretty exciting story. What's next? Lies on ice?
However, all I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
If they're still here. And if they're still alive. And that's one big if. There ain't no way you're gonna take them boys out setting off them bombs.
I have no doubt. And yes, some Germans will die, and yes, it will ruin the evening, and yes, Goebbels will be very, very, very mad at you for what you've done to his big night. But you won't get Hitler, you won't get Goebbels, you won't get Goering, and you won't get Bormann. And you need all four to end the war. But if I don't pick up this phone right here, you may very well get all four. And if you get all four, you end the war tonight. So, gentlemen, let's discuss the prospect of ending the war tonight. So the way I see it, since Hitler's death or possible rescue rests solely on my reaction, if I do nothing, it's as if I'm causing his death even more than yourselves. Wouldn't you agree?
I guess so.
How about you, Yutovich?
I guess so, too.
Gentlemen, I have no intention of killing Hitler and killing Goebbels and killing Goering and killing Bormann, not to mention winning the war single-handedly for the Allies, only later to find myself standing before a Jewish tribunal. If you want to win the war tonight, we have to make a deal.
What kind of deal?
The kind you wouldn't have the authority to make. However, I'm sure this mission of yours has a commanding officer. A general. I'm betting for OSS would be my guess. Ooh, that's a bingo. Is that the way you say it? That's a bingo.
You just say bingo.
Bingo! How fun!
Okay, now that we haven't convinced Jason, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back talking more Inglorious Basterds with Jason Spiegelman. Stay tuned.
Hey friends, Astrid here. You may know me from such films as Crazy Rich Asians, White Oleander, or How to Train Your Dragon. Wait, what was that? I wasn't in those. Okay, that wasn't me. Ooh, okay, well. Astrid here. You may know me as the other half of your favorite podcast host, Dr. Alex Swan, and I'm here to shout out listeners like you. Thanks for supporting the pod. Whether that's buying merch, sharing episodes on social media, or making donations. You can visit cinemapsychpod.swanpsych.com to get your hands on previous episodes, or if you're like me, just another hoodie because we live in the Midwest. We appreciate you. Now, back to the show.
And we are back with Jason Spiegelman talking about Inglorious Basterds, 2009 Quentin Tarantino movie. Brad Pitt, lots of other people. You probably have seen it, and if you haven't, what are you doing with your life? The next scene that I think takes it's going to take some chunk of time to digest here, to take apart. The bear Jew scene where the bastards. But you know what? Jason, set the scene for the listener.
I'm calling the bear Jew. So there is a scene when the bastards, led by Aldo Rain, our Brad Pitt's character, have cornered 3 Nazi soldiers in the woods. And what we're led to believe is that one of these soldiers is an officer and the other 2 are enlisted men. And Brad Pitt is interrogating the officer. His name is Werner, right? And he wants Werner to share with him on the map that he lays in front of him. He says, now, right up the road a piece, there's a field. And in that field, we know there's some German soldiers, and we know there's some artillery. We know there's some positions there. And I want you to point on this map, and I want you to tell me how many, where they are, and what kind of weapons they're bringing to the party, the troop counts, the armaments, and so on. And Werner looks up at him and he says, you can't expect me, in this wonderfully affected German accent, you can't expect me to reveal information that would put Germans' lives in danger. And then Brad Pitt says, well, now, Werner, that's where you're wrong. That's exactly what I want you to do. And then he throws a bunch of, German epithets that I'm not going to repeat in there. And he says, you put your finger on the map and you tell me. Werner looks up and says, I respectfully refuse. And Brad Pitt now starts listening to this sort of knocking, this tapping that's coming from off camera.
Donnie! Yeah? Got a German here wants to die for country. Oblige him.
And we see the camera go to this, it's almost like a zoo, like a bear enclosure, right?
Yeah.
And we see down this dark tunnel, and we hear this tap, tap, tapping coming out of the dark tunnel. And Brad Pitt's character, Aldo Rain, tells us that, do you hear that? That's the bear Jew. You know who the bear Jew is? And Werner says, everybody knows who the bear Jew is. And he says, if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'm going to call the bear Jew. And the bear Jew is going to come out here and he's going to beat you in the head with a baseball bat. I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
So he says, point to that map and tell me what you want. Tell me what I want to know, or I'm going to call the bear Jew. And Werner looks up at him and let's just say he politely declines. And from there, we call Donnie Donowitz. We call out the bear Jew.
All righty. Now, Jason wrote some notes here. He said at the beginning, the intro, that a lot of this movie stuck with him. And I want to quote you, dear listener, on what he wrote in his remembrance of this scene, how he felt when he first saw this that long ago.
In the movie theater.
And I quote, I know that when I was in the movie theater, I was smiling and on the verge of cheering. Every thwack of the bat made me just a little happier. There were others in the theater actively screaming and cheering in delight as this terribly violent scene took place. Wow, Jason.
It's
wow.
It's accurate. He calls out the bear Jew. The bear Jew gives Werner a chance. Werner cusses him out, and he goes, Yad! Teddy, ball game goes Yad! And he nearly decapitates him with a Louisville Slugger.
Yep.
And, you feel this. I don't know if you felt it, Alex. You feel thrilled. You feel ecstatic that he just beat this man's brains in with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Well, it was a violent scene. And of course, as many a Freudian will tell you, just kidding. As somebody who doesn't appreciate doing violence in real life, sometimes it's enjoyable to watch, of course. But it's also especially enjoyable when it's a Nazi.
Do we believe in the rule of law? Do we believe in democracy? Do we like to spout off, right? Innocent until proven guilty, but do we really believe it? Or does innocent until proven guilty really only apply to some but not other people? Was my reaction so strong because I'm Jewish? I don't think so, because literally everybody I've ever spoken with who has seen this scene has said the same thing.
Yeah.
I friggin' loved it, right? What do we do with the cognitive dissonance that comes from believing that the Nazi guards should not execute helpless people, and yet a man kneeling there helpless, it's okay to execute him because of, what we know he's done. And, the way that I describe this, and Alex, you're just going to roll your eyes at me. What sort of Kohlbergian nightmare have we entered into? What circle of Kohlbergian hell have we descended to where we're trying to figure out what is and what is not moral and ethical here?
Right. I don't think I have a good answer other than, he was a Nazi. And we've been, since the existence of Nazis, any good moral person has looked at that and said, nah, that's not something I want to do. And many in more heavier terms than that. So I wonder if it's just our collective socialization. I find it potentially hard to believe that somebody in the Proud Boys or a neo-Nazi would feel the same glee that you and I felt at this scene. And so that is my only answer to you on this, is that our collective socialization, that Nazism is bad, and what Nazis did during World War II and before was not at all good or moral or right. And so we're just like, yeah, that's great. You see, and we look at this in 2009, right? This is 70 plus years after the Holocaust. And so we are looking at it with generations removed eyes. You and I, of course, is what I'm talking about. Obviously, there are still Holocaust survivors with us today. But you and I, as generations removed from the Holocaust, we're looking at this from a very historical point of view. I don't know if we would have felt the same glee if it was not a Nazi.
There is a sort of ongoing and oft-cited ethical and philosophical conundrum when people talk about the horrors of the Holocaust.
Right.
And, people often say, wouldn't it have been great if Hitler had never been born? Wouldn't it have been great if somebody had taken out Adolf Hitler? Wouldn't it have been great if this never happened? And of course the answer is yes, it would have been great if this had never happened. But the ethical
Right.
conundrum that people are often asked is, if you could go back in time and you could pull the trigger to kill the Fuhrer, would you do it? And
that's time travel rule number 1, baby.
Time travel rule number 1. But it really, you would expect people to say absolutely. And from the reading that I've done about this, a lot of people say, I would want it done, but I wouldn't want to be the one to do it. So then when we watch this person, we're living vicariously through the bad of the bear Jew. And it's just a little bit of, I don't know, satisfaction for something that I think most people would probably not be able to make themselves do. Certainly not that violently. Would it have been different if he just pulled a trigger and blew his head off and that was it? I don't think so. I think the satisfaction comes from the primitive horrendousness exacted upon this person who probably exacted primitive horrendousness on others.
Oh, yeah. 100% literal eye for literal eye in this case, right?
Yeah.
You did these terrible things to my brothers in Judaism. Guess what? I'm going to do the same thing to you.
And then it takes...
And that's why the bastards themselves adopted such harsh tactics, right? The skinning, scalping, excuse me.
Yeah,
the scalping of them, and the fact that out of a group of 10 guys in the bastards, they owed him each 100 Nazi scalps.
Nazi scalps. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But then again, we also are left with, going back to the idea of closure and, what would have happened. So here's a question, right? And it's a Tarantonian kind of question. We don't know if Le Padit and his daughters survived. So if Werner had given the information, would the bastards have let him live and just carved up his forehead? Well, that's what they did for Private Butz. So who knows?
Right. But here's the thing that I think the bastards were doing in universe. The thing that the bastards were doing is they were always letting one or two people survive.
Right.
And they were always carving with knives swastikas in their foreheads so they could never take off the uniform. They were always letting, because that's how you grow reputations, right? That's how
you
everyone
create the nightmare.
Right. You create the legend that haunts you. And the guy who plays Hitler in this movie shows you that on his face.
Yeah, the horrendousness of his response to seeing this carved scar on the man's forehead. But remember, Werner, right, was an officer.
Right.
Would he have let an officer go versus an enlisted man, a private, who perhaps had not had an opportunity to have the history of horror and so on and so forth? So, who knows? Another little bit of sort of potential unresolved plot twist.
Plot twist.
I started to say plot hole, but it's not a hole. It's they killed him. If they hadn't killed him and he had pointed to the map, what would have happened? I don't know.
Well, if this is it, old boy, I hope you don't mind if I go out speaking to kings.
By all means, Captain.
There's a special rung in hell reserved for people who waste good scotch. Seeing as I may be rapping on the door momentarily. I must say, damn good stuff, sir. Now, about this pickle we find ourselves in. It would appear there's only one thing left for you to do.
And what would that be?
Stiglitz.
Say auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi boss.
The last scene that I want to talk, well, maybe not the last scene, but the second to last scene, at the very least, that I want to talk to you about is the bar scene, which is my favorite scene in the movie. And it is definitely Tarantino-esque. It subverts expectations. You think, oh, okay, they are going to get out of this pretty relatively unscathed. Obviously, on second and third viewings, you know what's going to happen. So you can look at the scene a lot differently, and you can explore how Tarantino just chess pieces everything into position. Wonderfully done. So the scene, folks, is a meetup between Frau von Hammerschmark, who is defecting and is spying for the Americans, or the British, and a young lieutenant in the British Army is sent to rendezvous with both the bastards and her to get them to this film premiere in Paris.
La Louisiane.
They knew that that Goebbels was going to be there. A lot of high-ranking Germans were going to be there. Von Hammerschmark, on the other hand, knew at the very last minute that Hitler, too, was going to be there. So they had to rendezvous at this bar. Jason called it. I'm not even going to attempt to say it again. And pose as German officers meeting her as old-time friends. Well, unfortunately, one German enlisted soldier had to go and have a baby. And he is celebrating with his troop mates in this bar with von Hammerschmark. And, like, nobody questions that she's there. And they're playing a game of, what's it called?
I don't know what it's called. You stick a card to your forehead, and then people give you hints, and you have to guess what's written on the card.
Yeah.
It's heads up without iPads.
And then the three bastards, I'll just say that Archie Hickox is part of the Bastards at this moment. He's Michael Fassbender. And they meet Van Hammersmark, and they're like, I thought you said there weren't going to be any Germans here.
And she said, oops, oops.
But here's my thing. This is where movies lose me sometimes. I'm going to go on a mini rant. I need to get a bumper here where Alex goes on movie rant. Mini movie rant here. She could have, Von Hammersmark, she could have ended this whole thing much, much earlier and told that German officer who ends up joining the Bastards at their table,
Major Hellstrom,
exactly. She could have told him to leave. But she goes, no, he can stay. Blah, blah. Seriously, she sabotaged it. Oh my God. And I don't think she sabotaged it intentionally. She almost died, of course. But dude, her ultimate death, being strangled by Hans Landa, really was a long time coming. Like, she dodged death's bullet, literally, in the bar shootout, but she sealed her fate when she was like, oh, no, Major Hellstrom, join us. She had the intel they needed. Hitler was going to be there. And of course, she just decided, no, I have to be an actress first, spy second. It's so dumb. Anyways, I know it has to happen in the movie. I know it has to happen that way in the movie. But it just bothers me from a narrative standpoint. I mean, most movies, Jason, you know this. Most movies, most TV shows would be 5 minutes long if people would be like, oh, you made a mistake? Cool, let's talk about it. Or they don't walk out the door when somebody's like, let me explain. Okay.
Or they hear a noise in the backyard at night and they go out to investigate and you're all screaming, don't go out there. Well, there would be no horror movies if people didn't go out there.
Yeah, I know. It has to be this way.
Suspension of disbelief, my friend. Suspension of disbelief.
Sometimes I just get pulled right back into it, you know? Just have conversations, people. Just converse with one another, please. That's all I'm asking. She delays the telling of the intel, which allows this frickin' major to figure out, he had his suspicions, to figure out that Hickox wasn't German from the tiny little village of Pitzpalau, or whatever it was, at the base. Pitzpalu at the base of the Alps, or whatever it was, Bavarian Alps. That's why his accent was so weird. And then, of course, we lose two of the best bastards, by the way. Two of the best bastards. They don't have a German speaker now, except for Von Hammersmark. She's pretty much useless at this point. She ends up getting shot in the leg like an idiot. But this scene is so good. You know why it's so good? Because it plays out one moment after one moment. You are on the edge of your seat this entire scene. I give the scene its crap, but it is so well shot. Every second is like, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? You have overwhelming dread from moment to moment. Overwhelming dread that something really, really bad is going to happen because, you know, it's a Tarantino movie. You know, most people in his movies die. You grow to love them and they get snatched from you in his movies. You're like, oh, I love that character. Why? Like, we're looking
Why did you have to take Wiki from us? Why'd you have to take Stieglitz from us?
Yeah, like, come on, man. I liked Hickox. I like Michael Fassbender, and you get
Magneto, man. Come on.
You get them snatched away. And you're like,
right.
Oh, man. But overwhelming dread from moment to moment. And what ultimately gets the bastards done in in this scene, unfortunately, which ends in a shootout, is the way that Michael Fassbender tells the French bar owner how many glasses that he wants. And now, listener, I don't know about you, but when I say 3, I usually put my 3 fingers up, right? Index, middle, and ring. And that's apparently a Britishism, because the folks in Germany at the time would do the American Sign Language way, which is to use your 2 fingers and thumbs to point out you want 3 of something. I don't know why. I know why it is in American Sign Language, differentiating 3 from W. But I don't know why that would be weird in Germany. And so if you have any German history, they don't explain it very much. They just say that would just look weird to a German. And I'm just like sitting here like, why? Why is a representation of 3 weird in a particular way? Like, here's the thing. I know having done ASL, I know why if a person, a hearing person learns ASL, but is talking with somebody and uses 3 and it's interpreted as a W, I doubt it actually would get interpreted as a W. I'm pretty sure it would get interpreted as a 3, even though it seems weird.
An example of how this might relate comes from another movie. I'll spare you the name of it because it was such a bad movie. But if someone said to you, "It's really raining dogs and cats outside," you'd think to yourself, "You're not from here, are you?" Because we don't say that, right? There's nothing particularly wrong with inverting dogs and cats and dogs, but it's simply a tell that someone is not from that particular region, and there it is.
I totally get it. It seems to me that Tarantino sort of lost what would be the tell, because he does a misdirect with the accent. So this guy's got an ear for
regional dialects,
for regional accents and dialects, and it's like he says that Stiglitz is from Frankfurt and Wiki is from Munich.
Yeah. And you, Sturmbannführer, ich weiß nicht. You, Lieutenant, I don't know.
Captain.
Right? Captain, I don't know. Yes.
Yeah. And it's strange because I don't know if many Americans can do that on their own for American dialects, unless we're talking about major ones. Maybe Frankfurt and Munich and other places are major, and I'm just like sort of looking at it through an ethnocentric viewpoint, maybe.
Well, again, suspension of disbelief. We just have to let it roll off our backs. What's really interesting here, however, if we're going to bring this back, if we're going to attempt to bring this back to psychology, is the moment at which all 5 of them, I would argue, the 3 bastards, von Hammersmark and Major Hellstrom, certainly 4 of them, if we exclude the actor, right? They all know we're all going to die here.
Yeah.
There is no way any of us are getting out of here. Forget the soldiers at the other table. Forget the newborn baby's father who's now going to orphan his kid. We all know we're not getting out of here, and there's no way to talk our way out of this. So let's just start shooting, because that's how this is going to end up. Wow. In that moment, he says, you know what? Say goodbye to your Nazi body parts, and pulls the trigger, and that's the end of that.
Yeah, and then everybody pulls triggers. I don't get how the bartender has a shotgun. That makes a lot of sense. But, the other guys were drunk. I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
Well, just remember, there's a special rung of hell reserved for people who waste good scotch. That was a great line.
Yeah. There's a special...
Since I'm going to be knocking on the door momentarily, I hope you don't mind if I do. And then Hellstrom speaks English and he says, "By all means, Captain." And that's just the beautiful end of the scene coming up right there.
It is. And the scene is entirely, well, I shouldn't say entirely in German. There's a few French bits in there because This is a French bar, of course, in Nazi occupied northern France, north of Paris. So, but they're all speaking German, having fun speaking German, and everyone's having a really good time. And then,
right up until bang, bang, bang.
Now that I think about it, it's all Hickox's fault. It's all Fassy's fault. Because he started yelling at the enlisted man who just had a baby. Like, leave us alone. Well, he invited the major to come over. Imagine, the major would have not come over.
But it was also, I don't remember if it was Wiki or if it was Stieglitz who yelled at Private Wilhelm's compatriots to say, come over and get your drunk, boorish friend away from us right now. So, there's some blame to go around.
Stieglitz was an instigator as well. That's true. His quiet rage, as you put it, seethed over the top, because
that was the first time in the movie we see that happen.
And that's because he's being surrounded by Germans that he can't kill.
Yeah.
He's not allowed to do what he has destined for himself to do, which is kill as many Nazis as possible.
And he has to sit there wearing that Nazi uniform.
Yes.
Pretending to be one of them.
Specifically an SS.
Yes.
Nazi uniform, right?
Yes.
So he is seething, and every so often Tarantino will cut to him and just hating the pure smugness of this major and wanting so badly to do all the things very harmful to him. I wonder if Stieglitz could have killed him surreptitiously.
Certainly could have shot him in the head before and then started, firing bullets at everybody else. But, you and I spoke a little bit about some of the characters. Stieglitz is a really interesting character. I would argue that after Landa, Stieglitz is probably the most interesting character in the movie, or at least to me, in terms of, you use the word seething rage, but extraordinarily well controlled. And this instinctive hatred, this vindictiveness, almost at a primitive kind of level. And, like you and I were talking about, Stieglitz's character reminds me of a scene from The Silence of the Lambs, where the Hannibal Lecter character, who is, almost an animal in his own right, is described as having attacked a fellow inmate and, if I remember correctly, ate him. His blood pressure or his pulse never went above baseline. And we see this so often in this movie with Stieglitz. We see him stabbing a Nazi high-ranking officer through a pillow with almost a look of calm on his face. When he is broken out of his cell by the bastards and they're shooting guards and they're running all over the place and blood is flying everywhere, he never even looks up from his cigarette in his jail cell. And Aldo Raine says to him, your reputation as a Nazi killer is amateur. Do you want to go pro? And he just sort of nods and smiles. And he's so well controlled until he has to be in the presence of this guy, and it is just oozing out of him. The fact that he held on for that long is really kind of impressive, given the nature of that character.
Yeah. And so when he knew the writing was on the wall in this bar scene, he just shot his shot right into the crotch of a German Nazi, which is, fitting for his demise. He died doing what he loved to do, apparently. So,
well, there's no question in any of the bastards' minds that they're going to die doing this. Yeah. So that's okay. I mean, I think, for God and for country, we will do this thing.
Are you familiar with German cinema under the Third Reich?
Yes. Obviously, I haven't seen any of the films made in the last 3 years, but I'm familiar with it.
Explain it to me.
Pardon, sir?
Well, this little escapade of ours requires a knowledge of the German film industry under the Third Reich. Explain to me Ufa under Goebbels.
Goebbels considers the films he's making to be the beginning of a new era in German cinema, an alternative to what he considers the Jewish German intellectual cinema of the 20s, and the Jewish-controlled dogma of Hollywood.
How's he doing?
Frightfully sorry, sir. Once again?
You say he wants to take on the Jews at their own game. Well, compared to, say, Louis B. Mayer. How's he doing?
Quite well, actually. Since Goebbels has taken over, film attendance has steadily risen in Germany over the last 8 years. But Louis B. Mayer wouldn't be Goebbels' proper opposite number. I believe Goebbels sees himself closer to David O. Selznick.
Brief him.
All right, Jason, I want to end with just a brief chat about the portrayal of Nazis in this movie. We talked about Werner, we talked about Hans Landa, but those are two fictional characters that created for this movie. There are two real-life people portrayed in this movie. We have Joseph Goebbels and Adolf Hitler. And you had some interesting thoughts about the ways in which Tarantino portrayed them.
Tarantino knows that anybody with a moral center watching this movie is going to be sickened by the portrayals of Joseph Goebbels and Adolf Hitler. And so he takes a tact that is almost straight out of, Mel Brooks's The Producers. And he spoofifies them and he cartoonifies them and he creates this, if you'll forgive me, this effeminized caricature, particularly of Goebbels, as he sits in the restaurant. When he shakes hands, he does it with the wrist elevated. He's not going to shake his hand. He's going to let you kiss it like the Pope. And we see Hitler when he's discussing with Private Butz his interaction with the bastards. He's having this ridiculous portrait drawn of holding this cape in front of him in an almost Napoleonic kind of mockery. And in thinking about this, I just remember the Springtime for Hitler scene in The Producers and calling him Adolf Elizabeth Hitler and just mocking the crap out of him. I think that this is a Tarantino-esque way of letting the audience sort of, I don't want to use the word relate to, but maybe accept these characters as part of the plot and just for even a moment forget who they really are in history. It was a brilliant portrayal in a way that lets you hate but also laugh at these characters.
Yeah, and I think purposefully laughing at their exaggerations as well, right? So Goebbels is so up his own butt about what he's doing for the Third Reich and his job as propaganda minister, and he sees himself as this glorious film producer. This is Hickox comparing Goebbels to a masterful film producer, but really only explains that he sees himself, Goebbels sees himself as Selznick, but not actually being a Selznick.
But when Michael Myers' character asks, or was it Churchill who asks, how's he doing? And then Hickok says, quite well, sir. He's what was it, doubled or tripled cinema attendance? I don't remember the exact number. But he comments that he's actually doing quite a good job at being David O. Selznick.
He is, but that's historical. Goebbels was instrumental in getting the war effort in Germany quite a bit of boost, right? So as opposed to war weariness, everyone was down for it because of these films. I think that's a historical take. I don't think that's how Tarantino portrays him.
Well, I mean, Tarantino, I hate to bring this up, but Tarantino just wants us to laugh at him. He's got his German to French interpreter played by Julia Dreyfus, who, by the way, Shoshana Dreyfus's character is named after Julia Dreyfus, right? And then in a maybe 1.5 second cut, during the restaurant scene with Shoshana, we see this brief interaction of Goebbels having a romantic interlude with Dreyfus, and he is making these ridiculous, almost monkey-esque noises while having sex with her, and I'm not going to try to repeat them here, but we're meant to just laugh our asses off at this person who we're supposed to hate. And that's exactly what happened in The Producers as well.
And I'll just briefly say that the first words that we hear Hitler say in the movie are a series of no's, obviously.
999.
But somebody who is so exasperated in 1944 about the walls closing in that just any little thing sets him off. It's so good. It's so good. Perhaps one of my favorite portrayals of Hitler behind what they did to the fictitious character in Springtime for Hitler. So I think we did a pretty good job of encapsulating some of the nuance in this movie, some of the psychological themes that this movie has for it. Any last words, Jason?
One of the things that I think is sort of to bring us back to the beginning, we talked about when Lepadit and Landa, during the interrogation at the dairy farm, changed their language so that the Dreyfuses would not understand what was being said to them. This analysis did not come from me. I picked this up in some of my research. Near the end of the movie, when Shoshana, after she has been shot, but she's pre-made this movie to switch the viewing so that she tells everybody in the theater, you're about to die, I'm about to kill you, my vengeance is nigh. She does that on the screen in, was it English?
Yeah.
And there was no reason to believe that Hitler spoke English. And so in sort of a turnabout, she's speaking to him right before he is to be killed in a language that he cannot understand, in exactly the way that Landa did to the Dreyfuses right before they were to be killed. So I thought that was really interesting. I never picked up on that, but in my research for our conversations, and I thought that was really, really interesting. And now I want to go back and watch the whole movie yet again.
So historically, was Hitler not known to speak English?
If he spoke any English at all, it would have been, a few words at best.
Okay. So it's not just how he was portrayed in the movie, but historically he was anti-English. Okay.
Well, remember, he believed in the master race.
Right.
And
the master race spoke
that was
German.
Germans,
Yeah.
right? Let me just see. It says, just in a brief Google search, which I tell my students not to do all the time, that Hitler spoke no language other than German. So if that quick hit is correct, then that supports this idea that Shoshana has come full circle and has turned it right back around on Hitler.
Yeah. Too bad it wasn't Landa, Too bad she didn't exact her revenge. She probably had that in her mind.
Right.
Thinking
but Landa was onto it.
Thinking that he would be in there, but he purposefully never went into the theater. He knew what was going to happen. He 100% was never going to go in there. And he kind of got an idea of von Hammersmark and the Bastards being there. Like, why are these people here? And Margarete. These two bastards who could not speak any Italian.
And then you have Brad Pitt just calmly a buongiorno. Right?
Yes.
So while you're watching the movie, you're wondering why is he letting them in? And now you think to yourself, well, there was method to the madness, of course. So.
Yeah, buongiorno. Sounds like he's going to be making a pizza restaurant called DiGiorno.
Right? That's DiGiorno,
yeah.
right?
Oh, God. DiGiorno. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank Jason for joining me to discuss Inglorious Basterds. While saying goodbye, Jason, is there anything that you'd like to plug?
No, I don't have a whole lot coming up. Listen, if you are in our part of the country in March in Boston this year. In March of 2023, we will be having our conference of the Eastern Psychological Association, for which I serve as the teaching chair, and it has had a really, really nice turnout for the teaching programming. I'd love to have some of you participate. And hey, it's Boston. It's a new hotel that we haven't been at before, so please come. In October, October of this year, the Mid-Atlantic Teaching of Psychology Conference, MATOP, for which I am pleased to serve on the organizing committee, will be held virtually this year. So if you need information about that, please reach out to me. And other than that, I wish you all a wonderful fall semester as we are hoping to move past the pandemic. May monkeypox never hit too hard, and let's look forward to getting back to life as it was just a few years ago.
I don't think that's happening, but...
No, I don't either.
All right, Jason. Well, it was good to have you on again. Until the next episode, thanks for listening.